I guess this is going to serve as a sort of part two of my last video. So I've just watched a rally speech from Savannah, Georgia, by Kamala Harris, and it was impressive. I thought she got a good balance. It's that case of like whipping up the crowd into enthusiasm, but the point about it was there was substance there. She was talking about policy. It wasn't just me, which is what her opponent's all about. There was substance there. Um, And there was bits of it that struck me. She, of course, spoke about the abortion issue, but she made the point that you can be a person of faith, you could be religious, and still recognize that the government shouldn't be telling people what to do with their own bodies. I thought that was smart because I think it's a way of basically saying, look, you don't have to absolutely agree with abortion, but at least recognize it's not the government's place to be dictating the rights and wrongs of it. Um, she spoke about the Constitution, and she said the most patriotic thing, in her opinion, was standing up for the Constitution. Notably, her opponent has trashed it. I thought it was a strong speech, and she also pointed out that they're the underdogs and they shouldn't be complacent in this election. Georgia, of course, is one of the battleground states. Um, but, it's very important that the optimism that I think is palpable in the Harris Waltz campaign cannot be, there cannot be complacency with this because Andrew Buncombe made a good op-ed actually in the newspaper. He mentioned, for example, that Democrats need to be careful not to fall into the trap of some of the things they're attacking Trump for, like a personality cult. So, of course, there's going to be optimism around Harris, and actually, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with promoting the nominee in a very positive way and looking at their backstory and all of that. That's always been the case. Um, but they need to be careful, for example, if someone disagrees with Harris, whether they be a Democrat or a wavering Republican, that's okay. They need to be welcoming people into the fold. And it cannot be purist. It cannot be like, well, if someone's a Republican who is on the fence and maybe they don't agree with abortion, maybe they're a gun owner, maybe they don't like some of the critical race theory stuff, but they cannot stand Donald Trump or they're concerned about Trump, Democrats need to be bringing that person into the fold, even if it's just one election. They could go back to voting Republican in 2028. But this is so important. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say it is the most important American election in my lifetime. I think Harris was right to say that the stakes are higher. Of course, in every American election, they'll say it's the most important one, but I really sincerely believe this one is. I think it's about the 10th American election of my lifetime, and I can't remember any. 16 and 20 was bad enough, but this time the implications are so high. You've got a convicted criminal who's now a major party nominee. You have his explicit threats of revenge and threats of bloodshed if he loses, warnings of bloodshed if he loses. I mean, that is just so striking. The character difference between the two nominees is absolutely palpable. Harris isn't perfect. The Republicans will try and attack her. Apparently, she had an affair early in her first marriage, things like that. But really, whatever dirt they think they could get on her will be minuscule compared to the things Trump has done. Not even close. I can't think of any major scandal with Kamala Harris. And the fact she's been vice president, it won't be that easy to say, well, because if Biden is the nominee, it would be easy to point to things that went wrong in his administration. Traditionally, the vice president has limited power. So again, that will fall flat. Attacking her on crime will fall flat. Attacking the Democrats on crime might be more effective. She was a prosecutor, however, her party's record is nothing to shout about, although, like I say, they're much better on the gun issue. But what's notable about this is I don't see a single senior Democrat going over to Trump, not one. Yet there's been up to 200 Republicans, that is, staffers, campaign people, former cabinet members, advisors, now coming out for Harris. As Adam Kinzinger said, he's a Republican former congressman. He doesn't agree with everything Harris stands for, but he urges fellow Republicans to do the right thing. I think it actually took courage for those Republican, and there's about 4 or 5 others, I think it was about five altogether, that spoke at the Democratic National Convention. I think it took guts to do that because we saw the fanaticism from extreme MAGA people, the threats that they were issuing against Republicans who supported the result. There was speculation there was going to be a big name appearance, possibly even former President George W. Bush. I don't really think that was going to happen. Mitt Romney was also suggested. Both Romney and Bush have denied that. Um, in the case of Bush, he's made it clear that he just doesn't comment on his successors. Fair enough. But I think it's no secret that the Bush family is no friends of Trump, and they may not vote for Harris, but I'd be shocked. I mean, I think they'll abstain, or I cannot see the Bush family giving, for example, what Barbara Bush and Jeb Bush said about Trump. I just think that that would be. I don't think they'll support him. I can't see Mitt Romney supporting Trump because he's one of the most senior Republicans who hasn't only said that, oh, I disagree with Trump on this, and he's actually outwardly said he's, warned of the threat that Trump poses. McCain certainly did. Um, so that gives me optimism, the fact that mainstream Republicans, by the way, some of these people aren't squeaky clean. They served in Trump's administration. They helped prop him up. But maybe that emboldens their argument even more. The fact that they saw him firsthand. Um, One of his advisors had actually, been around the world with him, and they said that foreign dictators took him for a ride. They duped him. This is people who work closely with Donald Trump, not some left wing columnists. These are people who work with Donald Trump, Republicans. I would take that seriously. And like I said, I don't see a single Democrat going over to the other side. Of course, there's a difference between Republican politicians versus Republican voters, but even there, I think there's a lot of people on the fence. Now, the Democrats certainly need to win those people over, and the way to do that is, I think, by talking about bread and butter issues. I think it would polarize people if they, for example, talk about critical race theory or that sort of thing. If they're telling a poor white voter who may now be uneasy about Trump in somewhere like West Virginia or even one of the swing states, oh, we're going to impose critical race theory in the curriculum, all that's going to do is polarize people. So the Democrats need to be careful about that. I think they're going to lose some support with some traditional young Democrats, especially young Muslims, because of the issue over Gaza. And with some justification, they will say, well, you're condemning the civilian losses in Gaza, but you're still supporting Israel. This convention was in Chicago. Chicago, of course, was famous for the anti-Vietnam protests that descended into violence in the 1968 convention. It wasn't quite as bad this time, and notably the Chicago police were being a little bit hands-off. Um, but there's real anger there. All I would say, whilst I respect some of the concerns with that, at least the Democrats are trying to get a ceasefire. I don't know what Trump's policy is. He's vague on it. At least the Democrats are trying to get a ceasefire. Okay, you may hate the fact they support Israel, but honestly, I don't think any American president isn't going to support Israel. It's just, and if they don't support Harris, that's going to put Trump back into the White House. Given, call it the Muslim travel ban, if you will, given his record, do they really think he's the person to trust? And the problem with not voting is it can, I can understand people being disillusioned, but I think it's more effective to vote for the person who could beat Donald Trump rather than not voting at all. That's how I feel about it, particularly in swing states. On the issue of the convention, the Clintons made strong speeches, the Obamas did. Um, like I say, the Democrats need to be careful not to look like they're pushing a personality cult, although it's palpable, the sense of optimism. Yeah, it's joy in politics. The Trump campaign is scraping the barrel when they attack her laugh. I mean, really? Is that the best that they've got? Um, One just gets a feeling of optimism, as with 2008, and I must admit, I felt it watching that convention. Even the way the conventions went, the Democrats seemed to be more energetic, more youthful. Even the state roll call, it was all in, I'm not saying that's what should matter, but it just seemed to be symbolic of what's going to happen. The Republican convention, by contrast, just looked kind of boring. Trump droned on for 92 minutes. Harris spoke for 37 minutes, no doubt with a lot more substance. And a caveat here, I didn't watch the whole Republican convention. I was in the Philippines, but that's not here or there. I think they're going to win, but this optimism and this joy in itself won't win the election. I mean, if someone is struggling with the rise in cost of living, telling them Trump's going to be a dictator is going to count for less than talking to them about what they will do about that, for example. And it's all very well talking about joy and optimism and having a big party in Chicago, but for people, who are struggling, that might look like being in a bubble. I mean, having JB Pritzker, talk about being richer than Trump, it's that sort of thing may get laughs in the convention hall, but I don't think it will go down well with swing voters. So they need to really, really get this right. It's so, so, so important. I'm going to wrap this up. I think I've probably said enough on the subject at the moment. I've no doubt there'll be a lot more to say, but I just think it's so important that Harris and Waltz win. Quickly on Tim Waltz, the Trump campaign's trying to portray him as far left. Well, he may well be, but the thing is, he's a Midwest governor. He's white. He's clearly working the crowds well. I think that was a smart move. I think if they'd picked another woman or another ethnic minority, it would be deemed to be too radical. Um, I think Harris is pitching out to everyone. She isn't just pitching to black voters or to women voters. That's very effective. Um, and when I look at her, I honestly feel optimism. I don't unsay anything I've said about woke ideology. I still deeply dislike critical race theory. I still deeply dislike some of the divisive woke narratives coming from the Democratic Party. I don't like them, and I'll continue to condemn those things. But this gets down to a point about democracy and personal character. I believe Trump has zero personal integrity. I believe Harris does. The character matters. I don't think it's irrelevant. I think it matters. The temperament matters. And I think the Trump campaign's in trouble. They know they can't attack her on age. They can't attack her on crime. They're in trouble. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in the first debate, if Trump even shows up.